The crisp Colorado air of 1879 bit at Jed's face, a familiar sting that blended with the dull ache in his side. He wasn't just running. He was pushing through a haze of pain, each step a testament to a will as rugged as the mountains around him. A fresh tear in his worn buckskin jacket, just below his ribs, was a stark reminder of his last brush with a bounty hunter, a close call that left him with more than just a memory. He'd patched it up himself, a rough job with a stolen needle and thread, but the wound throbbed with every jostle of his weary horse. His gaze swept over the vast, untamed landscape, a patchwork of towering pines and jagged peaks. This was his world, a place where the law was often miles behind, and a man made his own rules. But even out here, alone with the biting wind and the silent judgment of the wilderness, the ache in his side felt like a constant whisper of his past. He was an outlaw, a man with a price on his head, and he knew it. Every town meant risk, every shadow a potential threat. He gripped the reins tighter, his knuckles white. His horse, a sturdy bay named Dusty, seemed to sense his rider's burden, her ears flicking back and forth as if listening to the silent language of the wild. They'd been through a lot together, escaping posses and braving storms. Jed knew he couldn't stop. Not yet. He needed to find a place to rest, to properly tend to his wound. But more than that, he needed to put more distance between himself and the relentless pursuit of justice. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, a beautiful but fleeting promise of another hard-won night. As dusk settled, Jed spotted the faint glow of a small town in the valley below. It wasn't much, just a cluster of wooden buildings huddled together against the vastness, but it promised shelter, perhaps even a doctor if he was lucky. He urged Dusty forward, the thought of a warm bed and proper care outweighing the danger of being recognized. He decided to skirt the main road, hoping to find a quiet stable or an abandoned shack at the edge of town. But as they drew closer, a commotion broke the quiet of the evening. Shouts echoed, sharp and angry, mixed with the terrified cries of women. Gunshots ripped through the air, sounding too close for comfort. Jed pulled Dusty to a halt, his hand instinctively going to the pistol at his hip. A robbery. Not just any robbery, but a full-blown attack on the town. His first thought was to keep moving, to avoid trouble, but then he saw them. A group of rough-looking men, faces hidden by bandanas, were ransacking the general store. One of them, a hulking brute with a grimy hat, dragged a young woman out onto the dusty street. Her hair, the color of corn silk, had come undone, and her simple blue dress was torn. She struggled, her small hands batting at the man's arm, but he held her tight. Jed recognized her instantly from a few times he'd passed through this settlement. Eliza, the mayor's daughter. She was known for her gentle nature and bright smile, a stark contrast to the harsh world around her. Now, fear was etched onto her face, and her pleas were choked with terror. The sight stirred something in Jed, a flicker of something he thought he'd long buried. He couldn't just ride by. The sight of Eliza struggling, her face pale with terror, made Jed's decision for him. All thoughts of his own safety, his own pain, vanished. He spurred Dusty forward, riding straight into the chaos. The robbers, busy with their loot and Eliza, didn't notice him at first. Jed dismounted quickly, his worn boots hitting the dusty ground with a soft thud. He moved like a shadow, weaving through the frantic townsfolk and startled horses. "Let her go." Jed's voice, rough from the trail and strained with urgency, cut through the noise. The big brute holding Eliza turned, surprised. His eyes, dark and cold, narrowed on Jed. "Mind your own business, stranger," the robber snarled, pulling a pistol from his belt. He pointed it at Eliza, a cruel smirk on his face. "Or the pretty lady gets it." Time seemed to slow. Jed saw the glint of metal, the finger tightening on the trigger. He didn't hesitate. With a surge of adrenaline, he threw himself forward, pushing Eliza roughly out of the way. The blast of the gun was deafening. A searing pain exploded in his shoulder, far worse than his earlier wound. He stumbled, the force of the impact spinning him around before he collapsed to the ground, a gasp escaping his lips. Eliza, now free, cried out his name, a sound of shock and horror. The other robbers, startled by Jed's sudden bravery and the unexpected turn of events, exchanged confused glances. The brute who fired the shot seemed momentarily stunned, his cruel smirk gone. Jed lay there, a growing red stain spreading across his shoulder, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had saved her, but at what cost? His vision blurred, the sounds of the robbery fading into a distant buzz. The robbers, rattled by Jed's unexpected move, quickly made their escape as townsfolk began to gather, alerted by the gunfire. Eliza knelt beside Jed, her hands hovering over his bleeding shoulder, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice trembling. He tried to speak, but only a pained groan escaped his lips. His vision swam, and the world tilted. He was in bad shape, much worse than his earlier wound. Eliza knew she couldn't leave him there. If her father, the mayor, or anyone else found an injured outlaw, he would surely be arrested, perhaps even hanged. But he had saved her life. A fierce sense of loyalty, mixed with a touch of defiance, sparked in her. She had to help him. Looking around quickly, she saw that most people were still focused on the fleeing robbers or checking on the general store. With surprising strength, she managed to hoist Jed's arm over her shoulder. "Come on," she urged, her voice low but firm. "You have to move." She half-dragged, half-carried him away from the bustling main street, leading him down a narrow alleyway toward the back of their property. It was risky, incredibly risky, but she had to try. Her father would be furious if he knew, but her heart told her this was right. They reached the mayor's barn, a sturdy wooden structure that smelled of hay and horses. It was usually empty at this time of night. She struggled with the heavy door, finally pulling it open enough to slip inside. Guiding Jed to a quiet corner, she gently lowered him onto a pile of soft, clean straw. He was barely conscious, his breathing shallow. "Rest now," she murmured, pulling a blanket over him. "You'll be safe here. I promise." She knew she had a long night ahead, tending to a wounded outlaw in secret, right under her father's nose. While Eliza worked tirelessly in the dim light of the barn, cleaning Jed's wound and making him as comfortable as possible, a storm brewed inside the mayor's house. Mayor Thompson, Eliza's father, was a man of strong principles and an even stronger temper, especially when his town was threatened. He paced his parlor, his face red with fury. "This is an outrage," he boomed, slamming his fist on a polished wooden table. "To think those ruffians dared to attack my town, to lay hands on my daughter." He had arrived on the scene moments after the robbers fled, finding a shaken Eliza, but unaware of Jed's heroic act or her quick thinking. She had simply told him she was all right, too afraid to reveal the truth. "I will not stand for it," he continued, addressing the town sheriff and a small group of worried citizens who had gathered. "These outlaws will pay. We will track them down, every last one of them, and bring them to justice. No one threatens Harmony Gulch and gets away with it. Not while I am mayor." He swore to send out a posse at first light, to scour the hills and canyons until the culprits were caught. He spoke of law and order, of upholding the peace, his words echoing through the house. He had no idea that the very man who had saved his daughter, the man who lay wounded just yards away in his own barn, was himself an outlaw, a fugitive from the very justice the mayor so fiercely championed. The irony was a thick, unspoken tension in the air, known only to Eliza, who shivered not just from the cold night, but from the weight of her secret. Her father's booming words about catching all bad guys made her heart pound with fear for Jed. Days turned into a week, then two, as Jed slowly began to mend in the quiet seclusion of the barn. Eliza visited him every chance she got, slipping away from her chores and her father's watchful eye. She brought him food, fresh water, and clean bandages, her touch gentle and her movements quick. At first, Jed was quiet, wary, his eyes watchful even in his weakened state. But as the pain eased and trust began to bloom, he started to talk. He spoke of the open plains, of hard times and tough choices, never quite explaining why he became an outlaw, but hinting at a life that offered few other paths. Eliza, in turn, shared stories of her own, of growing up in Harmony Gulch, of her dreams for a life beyond the town's dusty borders. She found herself listening intently to his words, seeing past the rough exterior and the wanted posters her father sometimes displayed. She saw the kindness in his eyes when he spoke of the wild animals, the quiet strength in his hands as he carefully helped her move a stack of hay. He wasn't the cruel, hardened criminal the world painted him to be. He was thoughtful, observant, and surprisingly gentle. She discovered a deep well of decency beneath his gruff demeanor. He even had a dry wit that made her laugh, a sound that brought a rare smile to Jed's lips. The barn became their secret world, a haven away from the mayor's booming voice and the town's judgment. Eliza began to understand that Jed wasn't just a bad guy. He was a man who had made difficult choices, but one who possessed a good, true heart. The more time they spent together, the more she realized that the lines between right and wrong, outlaw and hero, were not as clear-cut as her father always preached. One afternoon, as Jed slowly gained strength and was able to move more freely, Eliza approached him with a serious look in her eyes. "Jed," she began, her voice a little shaky, "I need to ask you something important." He looked at her, his usual quiet watchfulness in his gaze. "What is it, Eliza?" "I want you to teach me how to shoot a gun," she stated, surprising herself with her boldness. "When those men attacked, I felt so helpless. You saved me, but what if you weren't there next time? I want to be able to protect myself, to be strong." Jed raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. It wasn't every day a mayor's daughter asked an outlaw for shooting lessons. "A gun is a dangerous thing, Eliza," he said slowly. "It's not a toy." "I know," she replied firmly, her chin held high. "And I'm not asking for a toy. I'm asking for a way to be safe. I don't want to be scared anymore." He studied her for a long moment, seeing the determination in her soft blue eyes. He saw not just a request, but a deep need for strength, a defiance against the helplessness she'd felt. He knew firsthand the importance of being able to defend oneself in this harsh world. "All right," he finally said, a small, approving nod. "But you listen to every word I say, and you promise me you'll be careful." Over the next few days, in the secluded back corner of the barn, their lessons began. Jed, still favoring his mending shoulder, showed her how to hold the heavy pistol, how to aim, how to control her breathing. He taught her about focus and calm, about trusting her own hand and eye. Eliza was a quick study, her determination making up for her lack of experience. Jed watched her, a quiet pride growing in his chest. He wasn't just teaching her how to shoot. He was showing her how to find her own courage, how to stand tall in a world that often tried to keep women small. The quiet moments spent in the barn, the hushed conversations, and the shared secret of their shooting lessons wove a strong, invisible thread between Jed and Eliza. Each time Jed guided her hands on the heavy pistol, or when Eliza carefully rebandaged his wound, their fingers would brush, sending a jolt through them both. They found themselves lingering, finding excuses to prolong their time together. Eliza, who had always seen her future as orderly and predictable, now found her heart beating faster at the thought of Jed. His quiet strength, his surprising gentleness, and the way he looked at her with an understanding she'd never known, chipped away at the wall she'd built around her emotions. She saw him not as an outlaw, but as the man who had risked everything for her, the man who was teaching her to be brave. For Jed, who had lived a life of solitude and constant vigilance, Eliza was a ray of sunshine in his dark world. Her kindness, her stubborn courage, and the simple trust she placed in him stirred feelings he thought long dead. He found himself looking forward to her visits, to her soft voice and the way her eyes lit up when she hit a target. He knew this feeling, this growing warmth in his chest, was dangerous. She was the mayor's daughter, and he was a wanted man. Their connection was a love that was utterly forbidden, a secret that could destroy both their lives if discovered. Yet, neither of them could pull away. The barn, filled with the scent of hay and the quiet hum of their secret, became a sanctuary not just for Jed's healing body, but for their blossoming hearts. They spoke of everything and nothing, their words often unnecessary as their eyes conveyed a deeper understanding. The world outside, with its rules and dangers, faded into the background when they were together. The hushed world of the barn, however, could not completely shield their secret. Eliza's frequent disappearances, her often distracted air, and the faint scent of hay that sometimes clung to her dress did not go unnoticed by her father. Mayor Thompson, a man who prided himself on knowing everything that happened in his town, began to feel a prickle of unease. He'd heard a few whispers from the townsfolk, vague rumors about a stranger seen near their property on the night of the robbery, though no one could say for sure. And there was the odd comment from the stable boy about unusual movements around the barn after dark. At first, the mayor dismissed it as gossip, but as Eliza's behavior grew more secretive, his suspicions mounted. He noticed she spent less time with her usual friends and more time alone, always seeming to be heading towards the back of their land. One evening, he watched as Eliza carefully carried a covered basket out the back door, heading towards the barn. His brow furrowed. What was she doing? He knew she sometimes fed the stray cats, but this was different. Her movements were too careful, too secretive. A cold knot of worry began to form in his stomach. Was she in trouble? Was someone taking advantage of her kind nature? The mayor, a man used to being in control, decided he needed to find out the truth. He started asking subtle questions, observing Eliza more closely, and even walking past the barn at unexpected times. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he knew something was amiss. The thought of a mysterious stranger, perhaps even one of the outlaws he was so keen to catch, being so close to his daughter, filled him with a growing sense of dread. The air in the mayor's house grew heavy with unspoken questions and mounting suspicion, threatening to shatter the fragile peace Eliza had built. Jed's strength was returning, slowly but surely. He could move his arm without a wince, and the ache in his side had faded to a dull memory. He even managed a few practice shots with Eliza's pistol, his aim still true despite his recent injury. With each passing day, as his body healed, a heavy truth settled in his heart. It was time to leave. He knew he couldn't stay. He was an outlaw, a shadow of the law, and his presence here put Eliza and her family in grave danger, especially with the mayor's growing suspicion. Every glance he exchanged with Eliza, every shared laugh, was a reminder of the impossible choice he faced. Staying meant risking everything for her, exposing her to a life she didn't deserve. Leaving meant tearing himself away from the one person who had shown him true kindness and understanding in years. One evening, as Eliza brought him a bowl of stew, he took her hand. "Eliza," he began, his voice rougher than usual, "I'm almost well. It's time for me to go." Her eyes, usually so bright, clouded with sadness. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not yet. Please, Jed." "You know I have to," he insisted, his gaze meeting hers, full of a pain that mirrored her own. "Your father, he's looking for me, even if he doesn't know it's me. And those robbers, they won't forget what happened. I can't put you in more danger." He tightened his grip on her hand, a silent plea for her to understand. He had found a glimmer of hope, a warmth he hadn't known was possible. But his life wasn't meant for quiet barns and stolen moments. His life was on the open road, always one step ahead of trouble. The thought of leaving her, of returning to that lonely existence, was harder than any bullet wound. Just as Jed was making plans to slip away under the cover of darkness, a new threat loomed over Harmony Gulch. The very outlaws he had faced weeks ago, the ones who had wounded him and terrorized Eliza, rode back into town. They were angrier, meaner, and clearly looking for trouble. Word spread through the town like wildfire. They weren't just here to rob. They were here for revenge. The big brute, the one who had shot Jed, led the gang. His face was a mask of cold fury as he rode his horse slowly down the main street. "We got unfinished business," he yelled, his voice carrying far. "Someone here thinks they can mess with us and get away with it. We're going to find him, and then we're going to show this town what happens when you cross us." They began to smash windows, loot stores, and harass the townsfolk, their actions far more brutal than before. It was clear they intended to make an example of Harmony Gulch, and especially of the mysterious stranger who had dared to stand against them. Jed, hearing the commotion from the barn, felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He knew they were after him, and he knew that if they found him, Eliza and her family would be caught in the crossfire. Eliza, hearing the renewed terror in the town, rushed back to the barn, her face pale. "They're back, Jed," she whispered, her voice filled with fear. "They're asking about you. They want to burn the town down if they don't find the man who stopped them." Jed's jaw tightened. His plans to leave quietly were now impossible. He couldn't abandon Eliza and the town to these ruthless men. His duty, his love, and his honor, even as an outlaw, demanded that he face them. The showdown he had hoped to avoid was now unavoidable. The sounds of the town being torn apart echoed in the barn, each crash and shout a painful reminder of the danger. Jed looked at Eliza, his face grim. "They're not going to stop until they find me," he said, his voice low. "If I ride out now, maybe I can draw them away from the town. Give you all a chance." Eliza shook her head, her newfound determination shining in her eyes. "No, Jed, you're still healing. And what then? You'll just be riding into another trap alone." She clutched the pistol he had taught her to use, its weight suddenly feeling comforting in her hand. "We face them, together." A moment of silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken fears and the weight of their impossible situation. Running was the outlaw's way, the smart choice for a man with a price on his head. But the thought of leaving Eliza to face these brutes, or of riding away and letting the town suffer, tore at Jed's soul. He had tasted a different life in this barn, a life with purpose beyond just surviving, a life with Eliza. "This isn't just about me anymore," Jed said, his gaze sweeping over her face. "It's about this town, and it's about us. About what we believe in." Eliza nodded, her resolve clear. "I won't let them hurt my home, or the man who saved my life. We stand for what's right, Jed. For justice, and for us." Her voice trembled slightly on the last words, but her eyes held steady. In that moment, surrounded by the chaos outside, they made their choice. They would not run. They would stand and fight, not just for the town's safety, but for the fragile, forbidden love that had blossomed between them. The time for hiding was over. With a shared look of grim determination, Jed and Eliza prepared for the fight. They moved swiftly and quietly from the barn, Jed grabbing his old rifle and Eliza clutching her pistol. The town square was a scene of chaos. The gang, emboldened by the lack of resistance, was growing bolder, smashing storefronts and firing into the air. "Jed," Eliza whispered, pointing. "The brute who shot you, he's by the saloon." Jed nodded, his eyes scanning the area. "Stay low. Aim true like I showed you." Then, with a yell that echoed his long-suppressed fury, Jed stepped out from cover, firing a warning shot into the air. The sound drew the robber's attention instantly. "You want me?" he roared, his voice carrying surprising power. "Here I am." The gang turned, surprised to see the mysterious stranger they sought, no longer wounded but standing firm. The brute snarled, "There he is. Get him!" Gunfire erupted. Jed moved with the practiced ease of an old hand, finding cover and returning fire with deadly accuracy. But it wasn't just Jed. From a hidden spot behind a water trough, Eliza took her first shot, hitting a barrel beside one of the outlaws, making him jump. Her hands were shaking, but she remembered Jed's lessons, focusing on her breathing, aiming steady. She fired again, and this time, her bullet found its mark, grazing a robber's arm. The townsfolk, who had been cowering in their homes, peeked out their windows, amazed to see not only Jed fighting, but the mayor's own daughter, Eliza, standing brave beside him. She reloaded her pistol with surprising speed, her eyes fixed on the fight. Jed, seeing her courage, felt a surge of pride and strength. They fought as a team, a fearless duo, showing everyone that bravery could come from unexpected places. They were not just fighting outlaws. They were fighting for their home, for justice, and for each other. Mayor Thompson, drawn by the renewed gunfire, rushed into the chaos of the town square, his heart pounding with fear for Eliza. He expected to find his daughter cowering, but instead he saw her, pistol in hand, firing with surprising skill alongside the very stranger he had grown suspicious of. His eyes widened in disbelief. Then, as the battle raged, one of the older townsfolk, Sheriff Brody, who had witnessed the first robbery, bravely yelled over the din, "It was him, Mayor. That stranger. He saved Eliza, took a bullet for her when that brute tried to shoot her." The words hit Mayor Thompson like a physical blow. He stared at Jed, then at Eliza, who caught his eye, her expression a mix of defiance and desperate hope. The pieces clicked into place. Eliza's secret trips to the barn, her withdrawn behavior, the subtle scent of hay. He remembered his rage, his pronouncements about catching all outlaws, and now he saw an outlaw, a wounded one, fighting for his town and for his daughter. A terrible conflict tore through the mayor. His duty, his deep-seated belief in law and order, demanded that he arrest Jed. This man was a fugitive, a bad guy by every definition he knew. But then he looked at Eliza, fighting with such fierce courage, clearly standing by this man, a man who had shown selfless bravery. He saw the love in her eyes when she glanced at Jed, a love he hadn't known existed. His daughter's happiness, her very life, had been saved by this outlaw. He was torn. How could he betray the man who had protected his child? How could he uphold the law when it meant condemning a hero? The fight continued around him, but in the mayor's mind, a far greater battle raged between his duty as mayor and his heart as a father. As Jed and Eliza fought, side by side, the tide of the battle slowly began to turn. Inspired by their courage, and with Sheriff Brody finally rallying the other townsfolk, the outlaws found themselves facing more resistance than they expected. The gang leader, the brute who had first shot Jed, finally fell, and the remaining robbers, disheartened, quickly scattered and fled, leaving Harmony Gulch in a dusty silence. The immediate danger was over, but a new kind of reckoning began. The townsfolk slowly emerged from their hiding places, their eyes no longer filled with fear, but with a mixture of awe and confusion. They had seen Jed, the mysterious stranger, fight like a lion, protecting their homes. They had seen Eliza, the mayor's daughter, stand strong and brave, her pistol a steady extension of her will. Whispers turned into murmurs, then into open discussion. "He saved Eliza," someone said. "And he fought for all of us," another added. The image of the outlaw in their minds began to shift. Could a bad man do such good? Could a single act of heroism wipe away a past of lawbreaking? Their mayor, still reeling from the shock of Eliza's secret and Jed's sacrifice, now had to contend with the changing hearts of his town. The law was clear. Jed was a wanted man. But the grateful faces of the people, the clear admiration in their eyes, as they looked at Jed, spoke a different truth. They were forced to decide if a person's reputation was fixed, or if a brave and selfless act could truly change who they were in the eyes of their community. The rigid lines of right and wrong that had always governed Harmony Gulch were now blurred, challenging everyone to look deeper than labels. With the outlaws gone, a tense quiet fell over Harmony Gulch. Mayor Thompson stood before Jed and Eliza, his face a mix of anger, relief, and confusion. The townsfolk watched, their murmurs dying down, waiting for their mayor's decision. "Jed," the mayor began, his voice heavy, "you saved my daughter. You saved this town, but you're still a wanted man." He looked at Eliza, whose hand found Jed's, a silent plea in her eyes. "My duty is clear. The law is the law." Eliza stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Father, the law didn't save me. Jed did. He has a good heart, and he proved it today. Is a man's past all that matters, or can his actions change who he is?" The mayor looked at the expectant faces of his townsfolk, then back at Jed, who stood tall, accepting whatever fate awaited him. He saw not just an outlaw, but the quiet strength and honor that Eliza had spoken of. He saw the genuine love between them, a love that defied all the rules he had lived by. In the end, the mayor made a difficult choice. He could not completely erase Jed's past, but he could offer a path forward. He spoke of a new life, a chance to start fresh, far from Harmony Gulch, where Jed could leave his outlaw name behind. It wasn't forgiveness in the eyes of the law, but it was a chance at freedom. Jed looked at Eliza, his heart full. Their love had been born in secrecy and danger, a forbidden bond in a harsh world. Now they stood at a crossroads. Could their love truly win against the strict rules of the Old West? Could an outlaw and a mayor's daughter build a life together? With a hopeful glance at Eliza and a silent promise in his eyes, Jed knew that with her by his side, they would find a way to make their own rules and build a future together, no matter how hard the road ahead.